Hello everyone. Okay, I hope we're all well and happy. So, in this lesson today, I'm just going to go over with you all very briefly the appointments system to the Supreme Court. Again, you should have done this as homework, so this should just be going over some of the main features for you. But then I'm really going to focus on what is wrong with the appointment process. So, on the Supreme Court, we know to be appointed on the Supreme Court or any other federal court, you've got to await a vacancy, usually caused by death or retirement. The president then nominates a candidate who he would like to see on the court. Now, you should have done this work from your home about the sources of US federal judges on the Supreme Court. The Constitution does not say where they have to come from. The most common route is to choose someone on the Supreme Court from one of the lower federal courts, usually the Court of Appeals. And this is not only quite a good source because obviously they've got judicial experience. Also, a president can see how that justice has performed in certain cases, like, for example, abortion cases, free speech cases, etc., etc. And so that might give them some confidence that their particular choice will decide things in the way which they think is the best once actually on the Supreme Court themselves. Now, once other sources, though, the Department of Justice has been a source. So, Elena Kagan had been Solicitor General, for example, and before that, she'd been in academia. In the past, there have been senators, state governors, even former President Taft became a Supreme Court Justice. So, you don't have to be from the judiciary, although it is kind of the favoured route. The second stage then is then it then goes to the US Senate. Madison was very keen in the Federalist Papers to say that he wanted them to go to the Senate because he wanted to prevent presidents from choosing people who he just liked through favoritism. Once in the Senate, they go to the Senate Judiciary Committee, and on that committee, they actually question the judicial appointee or candidate. Once they've been approved by the Senate Judiciary Committee, there's then a vote on the full floor of the US Senate. All 100 senators have the chance to vote yes or no. And if they vote yes, that person is then placed on the federal court or Supreme Court for good behaviour, so to speak. So that is how the judicial process works in terms of appointments. Very different to the UK, of course, where in the UK it's the Judicial Appointments Commission which is in charge of this process, which is made up of lawyers and judges, and it goes to the Prime Minister and the Lord Chancellor just for rubber stamping before they're appointed by the Queen. So it's far more kind of openly political, you might say, in the US. There is an argument to say that in Britain it's more quietly political, Prime Ministers or Lord Chancellors might say no to certain candidates. I don't think it happens very often. It's definitely more overtly political in the US. Now, there's quite a few things gone wrong with this process, and it seems to have been a fairly recent thing, i.e. in the last 30 years, that the process has become extremely political. So what we're going to do, I'm going to show you this little video from YouTube, which just kind of goes over some of the recent appointments to the Supreme Court and how it's just become part of a big political battle between the different parties, as opposed to really finding someone who will be a good justice.
The nomination of Brett M. Kavanaugh of Maryland to be an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States is confirmed.
Judge Brett Kavanaugh has just been confirmed to the United States Supreme Court, but from the moment his nomination was announced to the vote on the floor of the Senate was pure chaos. The U.S. Constitution enumerated that, quote, "The judges shall hold their offices during good behavior," which translates to lifetime appointments of justices. The reason that these judicial appointments are so important is because it not only affects the country for the remainder of the presidency, but for the rest of the justice's life. In the last couple weeks of the confirmation process in particular, Kavanaugh dominated the news cycle. Yes, the sexual misconduct allegations were a very large factor, but another huge factor is politics. Politics have been increasingly involved in Supreme Court confirmation processes, and this video will explain how that happened and what the consequences are. It started with Judge Robert Bork and what is now referred to as the Bork Precedent. In 1987, President Ronald Reagan nominated Judge Robert Bork to the Supreme Court to fill the vacancy from retiring Justice Lewis Powell. Bork was what would now be called a right-wing extremist. Many Democrats in the Democratic Senate strongly opposed Bork's nomination.
In Robert Bork's America, there is no room at the inn for blacks and no place in the Constitution for women. And in our America, there should be no seat on the Supreme Court for Robert Bork.
Bork had views that appeared to be against minorities and was publicly against affirmative action and abortion. Bork was rejected by the Judiciary Committee and the Senate.
The nomination of Robert Bork is reported to the floor of the United States Senate with a negative recommendation of 9-5.
This was the first time that a Supreme Court nomination was rejected solely based on ideology. To bring it back to the present, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said this just a couple of hours after Kavanaugh was announced as Trump's nominee. "I will oppose Judge Kavanaugh's nomination with everything I have, and I hope a bipartisan majority will do the same." This was many months prior to the allegations against Kavanaugh by Dr. Ford and others. Senator Schumer and many other Democratic senators vowed to block the confirmation of Judge Kavanaugh based solely on ideology. The nomination of Clarence Thomas to the Supreme Court caused a ruckus just as Kavanaugh has, including the allegations of sexual misconduct. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg was confirmed to the Supreme Court in 1993 by a 96-3 vote, and ever since then the partisanship of the Supreme Court confirmation process has increased. Breyer was confirmed 87-9, Roberts 78-22, Alito 58-42, Sotomayor 68-31, Kagan 63-37, Gorsuch 54-45, and finally Kavanaugh 50-48. The last several nominations have been nearly along party lines. Here's what Ginsburg said about the Kavanaugh nomination process.
How would you compare the process that you went through with what's going on today in that process?
Think of Justice Scalia, who is certainly a known character in what was it, 1986? The vote was unanimous. Every Democrat and every Republican voted for him. But that's the way it should be, instead of what it's become, which is a highly partisan show.
The Democrats have indeed had their way with the Kavanaugh confirmation process, but some may say that it's payback. Following the passing of Justice Antonin Scalia in 2016, President Obama nominated Judge Merrick Garland to fill the vacancy.
Today I am nominating Chief Judge Merrick Brian Garland to join the Supreme Court.
And the Republican-controlled Senate refused to even vote on the nomination.
This nomination ought to be made by the president we're in the process of electing this year.
That is party politics at its finest. No nominee was confirmed to the court until President Donald Trump nominated Neil Gorsuch to the seat. The confirmation process of Justice Kavanaugh has been the most partisan, and the whole thing is the epitome of party politics.
I hate to say this, but this is worse than Robert Bork, and I didn't think it could get any worse than that. This is worse than Clarence Thomas. I didn't think it could get any worse than that.
Only one Democrat, Joe Manchin, voted in favor of Kavanaugh, and one Republican voted against him, Lisa Murkowski. Although some are more partisan voters than others,
when you see Sotomayor and Kagan, tell them that Lindsay said hello, because I voted for them. I would never do to them what you've done to this guy.
Most of Congress has become dangerously partisan. Some may say that Kavanaugh was a special case due to the allegations set against him, which is true for several senators. However, keep in mind that many Democrats had their mindset on how they'd vote for Kavanaugh before any of the allegations. But they might just be getting back at the Republicans for Merrick Garland. In any case, both of these examples display the politicization of the Supreme Court and, in a broader context, party polarization. Party polarization.
So, from that little video, you can see some of the politicization of the appointment system to the Supreme Court. So, Robert Bork, back in 1987, Democrats, nearly all of them voted against him on ideological grounds. They did not like his views on things like abortion and women's rights and all these sorts of issues. He then really pops up again in the last few years. Merrick Garland in his failed appointment under Obama in 2016, and then obviously everything spilled out with the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation in 2018. So what I'm going to do on the next video, I'm going to explain a bit more about those two examples so you can put them into your work booklets, tell you what work you need to do on politicalisation on the Supreme Court, and then on the lesson on Monday on Teams, we'll have a nice chat about it, make sure we're all happy on this area. So I look forward to seeing you in a couple of minutes on the next video.